The world that we go into when we dream at night is the middle world of dream. And interestingly, that's also the world that we go into when we die, when we make transition. This is where the famous bardos of the Tibetan Buddhists are located, the middle world of dream. Now, below the middle world of dream, and talking about the spirit world now, are the collective lower worlds, which are the dreaming of nature. Everything originally came from nature. It was dreamed into existence, and once it was dreamed into existence in the spirit world, it was manifested into the physical world. A lot of the spirits that live in the lower world are nature spirits, the spirits of animals, the spirits of plants, the spirits of elementals, and so forth and so on. Those earthbound spirits which are connected with this planet especially are found there. And many of those spirits come into a relationship with humans to help them in various ways. This is where the shaman finds connection with power, for example, through animal spirits and plant spirits. And journeying in the altered state of consciousness into the lower world is a very ecstatic and very beautiful experience because it's not a dark world at all. It's actually a very light world, but it's, I could say it's a lot like this world that we're in right now. You can really get your toes into the lower world. And the entire, I guess you could say, visual and spiritual streaming of the lower world is dreamed by all of the aspects of nature that make it up. Now, the upper worlds are the archetypal source of what Judeo-Christians call heaven and which Islamic people call paradise. This is the dreaming of the gods, the goddesses, the spiritual heroes and heroines of the past. This is where our higher self resides, and it resides in the company of other higher selves, creating a spiritual field, which the kahunas call the human spirit, Kapoi Alma Kua, the great gathering of human higher selves.
They must be restless now, Hank, because of the things that have been happening worldwide, don't you think?
Well, they are. You know, I would say that there is a certain amount of alertness and agitation in a sense, because, as you're aware, we're coming to the end of a cycle of ages, and it's happening very, very quickly now. Everything seems to be unraveling. I mean, if you look at the state of the world, it could be observed that the world is not doing very well right now. You know, starting with the financial crash, and now we have all these weather extremes. Most of our social institutions and religious institutions are unraveling as well. And this, according to the kahuna perspective, is expected at the end of a cycle. And the image that Makua used of the ending of the cycle is a spiral. He said that life, the symbol for life is the spiral, and the spiral can maintain its integrity for a very long time, but then it can change very rapidly when energy flows into or out of the spiral. Well, we're at that point in this cycle of ages, 26,000 years from his perspective, in which we're coming to the end of that cycle. And so what he was particularly concerned with, and this is reflected in our relationship as well as in this book, The Ball of Light, he was particularly concerned with creating a foundation for the next cycle, a foundation on which things could be built. Because in his perspective, what we decide to build on that foundation for the next cycle will determine the path, the lifeways, and the spiritual practice of human beings for the next several thousand years. And
Hank,
it's not a small thing.
Would you say that other civilizations in different indigenous areas practice the same thing?
Well, you know, in looking at these spiritual levels, for example, one of the curious things, George, is that all shamans everywhere in the world perceive the spirit worlds in the same way. Now, this is quite striking when you consider that there's virtually nothing that everyone everywhere agrees upon as so. But this they do, that the spirit world is aligned in these three great cosmic regions, and everything that exists here in this world came into being there in that world first, and was literally dreamed into existence. So as human beings, we have this awesome responsibility, because we're world-class dreamers. We're creators. That's what the last chapter in the Bowl of Light is about. It's about how we're in the process of becoming gods. Now, these were, extraordinary revelations that he conveyed, and he would come and he would visit with the groups that we held here in Hawaii, and he would hold absolutely everyone captive, just spellbound for 3 or 4 or 5 hours while he opened up his heart and began to share this knowledge of how the world is put together, how we're put together, how everything essentially ravels or unravels as it travels across time. And, you know, this would put me in an anthropologist in the extraordinary position of receiving this knowledge and also trying to record it, because during our talks, I was not allowed to tape record anything or take any notes. You know, he said, you know, if you're writing, you're not listening. Now, this is very hard for Western people, and I would have to advise people in our workshops who came to see Makua and to hear him speak. I would have to advise them on the correct protocol.
Hey, Hank, I'm going to talk with you about his specific prophecies when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Hank Wesselman with us. We're talking about his work, The Bowl of Light. I am in the bowl of darkness right now. Hank, tell us about some of these predictions, prophecies from this shaman.
Well, to understand these, I think it's important to also bring into the dynamic here, Makua's perspective, that each one of us is living our lives in certain life roles, which determine to a large extent the experiences that we have in life. And he was quite adamant that there are 7 major life roles. Now, the first of these could be called the server. Those who are in service to, you know, all those good people who are working in banks and restaurants and airports and driving cabs, and, you know, they're all in service to the rest of us. And each one of these life roles has both a positive and a negative spin to it. The positive polarity of the server is to be of service, but the negative polarity is bondage. In other words, slavery. When people find themselves trapped in jobs that they hate, but there's no escape because, you know, they're constrained by a life of joyless striving, endless joyless striving. That's the negative polarity of the server. Now, the artists of our society fall into another very distinct realm. And for the artist, the positive polarity of the artist is creation. The artist is the one who dreams and who creates images of beauty and power. The negative polarity for the artist is deception. In other words, how many artists are, you know, just superb at imitating other people who have genuine talent while they have no real talent themselves? This would be considered an inauthentic artist. Now, I've mentioned that Makua was a warrior, and the warrior lifeway is one of the major roles. In the positive polarity, the warrior should be about persuasion. All of our politicians, all of our military, all of our corporate, business people, they're all warriors. And in the positive polarity, the warrior operates from a place of persuasion. But in the negative polarity, they go into coercion. Now, this is not to say that, the negative polarity is bad. In Makua's perspective, the negative polarity is where we learn our lessons. This is where we go into the school of hard knocks. And the great lesson of the school of hard knocks is how to lose gracefully. This is the kind of wisdom that this book is just chock full of. Now, in my life role, Makua recognized me as the scholar. And, I have to admit, I've spent all of my life in libraries, researching, reading. I've, got stacks of books around me at all times, sort of trying to ferret out answers to the great mysteries of our existence. The positive polarity for the scholar is knowledge. The negative polarity is theory. Now, once again, you can see that theories are not bad. This positive and negative polarity is more like electricity, all right?
Well, it could be worse, Hank. I mean, that's not bad if that's what your description is of you.
Yeah. Well, the negative polarity theory, hopefully when it's doing its job, it pulls us toward the positive polarity. This law of polarity is something that the Kahunas all embraced and understood very well. For example, love, aloha, that's obviously in the positive polarity. What would you think the negative polarity of aloha is?
Hate.
Well, we would tend to go there, but in fact it's not. The negative polarity of aloha is attraction.
Explain.
Think about this one. You know, I haven't looked at a Playboy magazine in years, but is Playboy magazine about aloha? No, it's about attraction. And when attraction is doing its job, it leads us toward the experience of aloha. So in the negative polarity, we learn the lessons that we need to learn, and we are drawn toward that which we are supposed to become in the positive polarity. And I bring all of this up because this is part of the prophecies and the predictions about where we're going to have to go in the next cycle. Now I could just mention the other three roles very quickly. The fifth level, what Makua called the fifth level, is the sage. And for the sage is the teacher, the kumu. You know, when I stand in front of a lecture hall filled with students at a university, I'm functioning as a sage. I have to draw on all of my wisdom and bring it forward to inspire and encourage and to enhance my students' perspectives of themselves and their life as they're living it. That's expression. The negative polarity of the sage is oration. Now you can think about a lot of our politicians fall into this category, where they just talk and talk and talk and talk to hear themselves talk, but they never say anything of worth. That's oration. That would be the sage in the negative polarity, sort of talking to draw attention to themselves. The political filibuster would be a good example of a sage operating in the negative polarity. And interesting, a lot of our entertainers are sages. People like David Letterman, people like Jay Leno. You can always tell a sage because they're funny. They tend to be very funny. The sixth level, what Makua called the sixth level, is the level of the priest, the level of the priestess. It's also the level of the healer. And for the priest, and you could say this about spirituality and religion in general, the positive polarity is about compassion. I mean, this